I hope you guys at home are doing well, or wherever they happen to be. So. Colin, what house do you work at? One. Okay. Nice. Nice. Okay. All right, let's see here. I'm going to set our timer. I've got our timer set to go off at about 11:52. That'll give us a little bit of warning to where we can take our breather, and then Captain PK will give us our logistical information in terms of where we're going to meet up after lunch and so forth. So Morgan, I wanted to put a name with a face with what we were talking about regarding those PRVs. And once again, Zach, if a firefighter that you were mentoring or training, if they weren't sure, just tell them, take the cap off and look inside. And you can absolutely do this at the Marriott. And at the Marriott, Joe, when you take the cap off at the Marriott, you're going to see the right-hand side. It's that smooth stem. And keeping in mind that a pressure regulating valve, regulating being that dynamic term, it has to be able to move. Hence, you have that smooth stem. It has the ability to move. There's internal hydraulic chambers that regulate that pressure, or theoretically are supposed to be regulating it properly for us and making it move. Joe, yesterday in the class, I had mentioned that there are some PRVs, and I would come over here to this one to show you. It's mounted upside down in a cabinet. And the manufacturers of all the PRVs say, whatever you do, don't mount it upside down in the cabinet. When it's mounted upside down, the standard issue rust, scale, sediment, debris that you see inside of a standpipe system, it starts to collect, and then it can no longer dynamically move. So that becomes a problem. But the easy thing for the young firefighter to do is take the cap off. When you take the cap off, you can identify whether or not you have a PRV. On the left-hand side with that threaded stem, that's going to be a standard valve. Now, for you in your city and for me in my city, Al, the key thing is we don't stop there. Okay, I take that cap off, I got a threaded stem, I'm good to go. You may have external restricting devices that you have to address. The good news about those is they're usually pretty easy to remove. All right, simple as that. Any questions on that right there? Now, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I want you to understand where a lot of this stuff is coming from. And this is not my stuff. This is just the historical stuff that's existed there. So if we got together and we had an investment group and we wanted to build a high-rise building in downtown Berkeley, in the process of doing that, there would be architects and engineers involved, not the least of which would be a fire protection engineer. And the fire protection system, specifically the standpipe system that would go into the building, that fire protection engineer would reference NFPA pamphlet 14 to determine what the standards of practice are for a standpipe system. Now, Alfonso, buildings built prior to 1993 required only a 65 PSI topmost pressure, and it's usually the roof manifold that they do the test from, but that was the pressure required there, the residual pressure with 500 GPM flowing. Post 93, it went up to 100 PSI. That was because of the fire at One Meridian Plaza in 91. They said, we need to up this pressure. There's an issue here, all right? So topmost or most remote outlet. So for the Marriott, and I don't know this for sure, Mike, I would think you probably going to be my resource on this because I think you have friends in the Fire Prevention Bureau based on our discussions about that chained hose valve outlets over there at the Marriott. If your system is like my system, and I'm guessing it probably is, when the Marriott went for its certificate of occupancy, the way that standpipe system was tested with 2.5-inch hose. 100 feet of 2.5-inch hose coming off of one outlet. There's a gauge at the outlet to a smoothbore nozzle, a 1 1/8-inch tip. A second 100-footer, 1 1/8 tip, and a gauge at the outlet. All right. They fire them both up. They start flowing them. A pitot gauge is involved. 50 for each stream. Tells us that our rule of thumb would be 250 times 2 is 500. Actual number is 266. They go back to the hose valve outlet. Do we have 100 PSI residual? If yes, you get a certificate of occupancy in terms of that component. So my point is this. The fire protection community for 100 plus years in our American Fire Service has been Designing and testing and verifying standpipe systems with 2.5-inch hose, and specifically designing those systems, Joe, under the assumption that you and I are using 2.5-inch hose. That's what they've been assuming, all right? So hence the reason for the discussion about 2.5, hence the reason for your department's decision to up your tube size from 1.75 to 2.25, because it's more in line with what's going on here. Now, I mentioned to you yesterday, if you remember this, I talked about really watching closely over the course of my time as a chief officer. That last 22 years, anytime I went to a high-rise fire, a fire that involved a standpipe, I'd ask the engine companies, Morgan, on engine 1, what was your pressure at the hose valve outlet? And they didn't know for sure. Then I'd have them flow it before we broke it down out a window or whatever to find out what it was. And in that 22 years, I've never seen a 3-digit figure. When I look closely at 14 and study it closely, and this is a very boring document, and a guy like you that's just studying psychology would get through this a lot better than I am. I have to use a magnifying glass, and what's that word? Okay, what does that word mean there? But when I look closely at this document, under the PRD, pressure regulating devices, 14 says this: if you have a static pressure at a hose valve outlet, a static pressure, water's not moving, at a hose valve outlet that's greater than 175, they want you to put a restricting device on there. Now that one doesn't mean that much to me, just like I said yesterday, static pressure doesn't mean that much to us by itself. This is the big one right here. 14 says this: if you have a flow pressure that's greater than 100 psi, then 14 is recommending, based on best standards of practice across our industry, they're recommending that you put a restricting device on there. Can you see why, if 14 is saying to put a restricting device on anything 100 psi or more, can you see, Zach, why I haven't seen a 3-digit figure in 22 years?
Is that based off of PO gauge?
No, this is just based off of a regular inline gauge. So the pitot is going to be the gauge that determines that stream pressure for us. This would be the gauge at that hose valve out that they're looking at. 100 feet of 2.5, there's our smooth bore 1/8. There's the pitot down there to get that 50 nozzle pressure, which tells us 250, actually it's 266, but it's the 500 GPM flowing with 65 PSI residual pressure pre-93, 100 PSI residual pressure post-93. And they're saying here that if it's above 100 PSI, then they want you to put a restricting device on there. So then I come full circle back around. Why have I not seen a 3-digit figure in real deal situations? Well, because they're following NFPA 14. Now, we could go somewhere right now, based on Mike talking to somebody from the Fire Prevention Bureau, we could go somewhere right now in Berkeley, California, and run 100 feet of 2.25 off of a standpipe and flow it and get over 100 PSI. I guarantee you, you could find that right now. I'm just telling you that for me, at real deal situations, most of which have been older buildings that are more likely to have a fire in them, I have not found a 3-digit figure. And this next case study that we look at, we mentioned it yesterday, the highest pressure that we got at the 999 18th Street case study was 50 PSI. So, and that's not what it should be, but that's what we got for that particular fire, all right? So that NFPA 14, if you have some extra time on your hands and you're really bored, or if you're having a hard time falling asleep, start reading 14, pamphlet 14, and I believe that you'll get a very good night's sleep shortly into starting to read this, all right? But that's just a little bit of information on that. All right, now, let me shift out of that one.
Has that document been updated since 2003, or is that the most recent?
It has been updated. The committee meets periodically. They met in 93, and the driving force there was the One Meridian Plaza fire. That's where you saw them up that to 100 PSI. It has been updated, but I think the 100 PSI is still the standard for that, okay? Now, there's other departments that will do their own thing and say, you know what, for us in this particular city, we want it to be this pressure or that pressure or whatever the case may be, and they'll up that number themselves. But once again, as with yesterday and certainly with today, the theme would be that foundation of that fire standpipe operations tetrahedron. The foundation would be standpipe system pressure, and for you and I had to have a big question mark. What's it going to be? What's it going to be? More than likely, it's going to be lower than what we think it's going to be. Okay? So just a short one here because I wanted to do a residential one. I wanted to do another commercial one, but I mentioned this one lightly yesterday because this is a building. I've been to multiple working fires in this building over the course of time. It's that type of building. Morgan, you had mentioned, what's the name of that building again? It's named the Harriet Tubman. What the heck did Harriet Tubman did? She did something. Okay, that's what Harriet Tubman. See, smart guy, Mr. PhD in psychology. I knew you'd know. All right. All right. You're one of those guys. You're probably one of those smarty pants that I was seeing the other day when I was walking around on the campus, and I'm like, I've got to be the dumbest person on this campus. There's no doubt right now.
I've never been accused of being the smartest person.
Well, I certainly have not been. So nobody loves you like your own family does. When most firefighters look at this building at 1955 Arapahoe in Denver, they think, is that a parking garage? Because it has kind of a look that way to it. It's a residential building. Those that you see, those slats that you see there, those are just exterior balconies. The thing about 1955 Arapahoe is I would say that, and Truck 4 is a block from here at 19th and Lawrence, PK. Truck 4 or Med 1, they're going to be at 1955 Arapahoe today, period. Maybe multiple times. All of the occupants at 1955 Arapahoe either have physical disabilities or mental disabilities, and in most cases both. So right off the bat, there's that component that tells us what's a benchmark to make a second alarm out of this building. The fact that a whole bunch of people cannot move on their own right off the bat is an early benchmark that you're going to need some help here. 16-story, it's about 200 by 60. It is not sprinklered, okay? And once again, most of the occupants are physically or mentally disabled. Yesterday, I touched lightly on this one, and I wanted to throw it out there because I'm not sure whether Harriet Tubman has some of these things or if there's a building specific in your district that has this. But in this ADA era that we live in, there may be something like this that exists for this specific building. Okay, Vic, on this 20th Street side, there's a standard issue stairwell with return stairs. Okay, a return stair configuration. Brian, on the opposite end of that building, toward the 19th Street side or toward the left end of the photo that you see, the evacuation stairwell is actually a ramp system where the ramp goes from front to back, from top to bottom. And it's designed so that people can evacuate via wheelchairs. So the bottom line is, this would be a building in Truck 4 and Engine 3's district where they would say the determination of the attack stairwell, pretty much 99% for sure, is going to be the attack stairwell is going to be this 20th Street side. Now, have we violated that before at fires here? We had a fire that was the first apartment from the ramp, the very first apartment from the ramp. And the company that did the reconnaissance said, I really don't want to lose this ramp, but you know what? The fact that we can do a 100-foot stretch and put water in this fire in about a minute and a half here is I'm going to violate that, and we're going to use the ramp system as the attack stairwell. We're going to get water on this fire. We're able to stop the fire, and then we'll address the smoke from there. So not to say that you, as they say, you should never say always or never. I do sometimes. I believe you should never take an elevator to a reported fire floor. But should we never use this ramp system as a attack stair? We should avoid it. We should do our best to avoid it, but we may, in fact, have to use it at some point in time. All right? So for this particular fire at this 1955 Arapahoe, Charlie's side showing pretty good, and this is the one where it's closer to the ramp system, if you will. All right? That's what that ramp system looks like. Now, Bill, do you know of anything in the city of Berkeley where there's something like this? Maybe on the UC Berkeley campus or somewhere in the city where there's a ramp system as one of the two evac components in the building? Because there may be.
Harriet Tubman did request a ramp and slides, but they didn't get them. So no, I can't think of any other building.
Okay.
Ed Roberts has like a big ramp that goes up, but it's like right in the center. It's not part of the evacuation.
So that ramp system does create a little bit of an issue for us. When we talked about this yesterday, and James and Joe, one of the things we said yesterday, which is going to tie in very well for a veteran firefighter, but if we were to ask a youngster on the job, on your job or my job, we would ask that youngster at a building like 1955 Arapahoe, it's a 16-story building, would you want the fire in 16-8 or the lobby? Most youngsters, certainly almost all lay people, and certainly most youngster limited experience firefighters, I want it in the lobby. It's right there. For goodness sake, I could get it with a pre-connect. I can maintain positive control. We talked yesterday, and the colleagues of yours in this room agreed that the higher we can put a fire inside of a building, the better off we're going to be. This one's about midway. And so we have some significant concern in terms of smoke propagation to the floors above that could involve, pinning down people that are in a bad way. Now, take a close look at this photograph for me, Vic, and look beyond the obvious and tell me something. This would be great information, PK, for you and I to get if you're my Charlie Division guy. PK, take a look at that Charlie Division. Tell me what's going on. And full disclosure, as I said yesterday, Brian, at this particular fire, I moved my command post to that back Bravo Charlie corner because that's where the entertainment was. And I use that term loosely, but what I really mean, as you know, that's where my information is that I can get via sight and sound to the best of my ability. What's one of the things that I'm seeing right off the bat there that says, oh boy, this is a problem? What do you think? What do you see in the photograph here? A lot of smoke, balconies. What else?
Is that intake for the HVAC?
Say it loud.
Is that an HVAC intake?
That's the vent for the ramp. That's the vent for the ramp. Do we have the possibility of the ramp becoming contaminated now with what's going on right here? So that's just trying to put now, how do I know the ramp exists? I've been in the building a lot of times. The value of getting into those buildings, the value of getting into those buildings on automatic alarms, the value of just taking the time. Geez, I haven't been in that building and I'm curious about that building, and heading in there and see if you can get permission to go in there. By 4:30 this afternoon, all of us, the 20 of us, but most specifically the Berkeley firefighter folks in this room, are going to have some really good information, thanks to you, about specific buildings in your city. And we'll all be just that much better for it. But finding out about those ahead of time. In this situation, that engine 6 was first due. They go to work on the FDC, and then that second due engine company gives them water, and that second engine company is just ahead of them at the hydrant, giving them the water. That forms that tandem pumping, or the short relay, if you will, so that we've got water into the system, okay? Standard issue hose packs at the time the attack was made with 2.5. Specifically, it was pre-2-inch attack hose line. Most of the occupants we were able to protect in place quickly. One of the things that I encourage you to do is this, and this is going to tie in closely for you and for the ladder 2, right? Truck 2 is you, and truck 5 I saw last night. If that cabinet, if this was the entire face of a building here, but that cabinet door right there are the doors to the building, we have a tendency when we go to those buildings on EMS calls and automatic alarms and that sort of thing, Mike, we have a tendency to come to the door and set our air brake and set up right here. One of the things that I encourage the truck captains to do, Vic, is if this is the alpha delta corner of the building, to stop your turntable right here. And that's probably something you're already doing. I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here. Especially with a tiller, it's a whole lot easier to adjust forward than it is to adjust backward. And if we stopped here on the nothing showing, if something develops, we got significant scrub area for a good portion of alpha and delta right off the bat. So what are we going to potentially be able to do with these aerials? Got one on the alpha side, put them up to the apartment across the hallway. And James, at the break you were asking about emergency egress, secondary egress. here was a setup for obviously civilian rescue primarily, but also firefighter rescue, so we can communicate to that division supervisor up there, hey, we have an aerial, in this case it's truck 8, has set up an aerial to the balcony, and having truck 8 specifically let me know, PK, what apartment is that you set up for? Turns out to be the apartment on the opposite side of the hallway from the fire department. Do we have the ability to drive in the back? Now, in 2023, they have since built a new building back there. I think you can still get back there to an extent, but as you know, you and I both know, getting to the Charlie side with a tiller apparatus is sometimes easier said than done. But is it something that's possible? And if it is something that's possible, why are they up and why are they in place? What am I thinking, El? What am I thinking? And keep in mind that's a tower ladder, so that's a real user-friendly piece of equipment now. What do I have the ability to do? Item number 1, I have the ability to complete civilian rescue. Fair enough. Item number 2, I have the ability for firefighter rescue, secondary egress. Item number 3, I have the ability for an alternative attack should something go south on the inside. And that's where there's going to be tremendous coordination from you and I, Bill, at the command post to Vic. Say, Vic, I know you had a burst hose line or whatever. I've got a tower ladder in position where we can give this a knockdown, scientifically based in 2023. We're not going to push it, but we can give it a knockdown. Let me know when you guys are in a position to manage the risk of that. Whether that's closing the apartment door, whether that's getting back into the ramp, getting back into the stairs or whatever, we are in a position where we can manage the risk. Then you and I could have them fire it up and darken it down. So threefold items there: civilian rescue, firefighter rescue, possibly alternative attack using that particular. And if you have his book, Brian, Chief John Norman out of New York, who is a guy I've always admired tremendously, he's got several books out. I don't know if you being a buff type guy like I am, back in the day I read a book called Report from Engine Company 82. And I will periodically read it from time to time just to, geez, I want to just go back to 1970 on Intervale Avenue and check it out. Norman's got a new book, and that's the one, Shoulders of Giants. It's really a great book. But his textbook, Firefighter's Officer of Handbooks, he says this, and I know this is probably not the right place to say this because I know California, by and large, is more of a tiller community than a tower ladder community, but Norman says the tower ladder is the most versatile master stream appliance on the fire ground. And I couldn't agree more. It is a very versatile master stream appliance, and that's one of the secondary components with regard to that. So fire is pretty quickly controlled, close to the end of the apartment, becomes a smoke issue. Got to search everything. At one point in the process, and I was lucky that day, Morgan, because I had somebody in a lobby control position that was really a sharp, engaged chief. Part of the lobby control thing that becomes really complicated for you and I, Brian, it's easy for us going in. And lots of times when we get focused on lobby control is about accounting for engine 2 and truck 2 and engine 5 up on the fire floor. If you think about it, though, in terms of accountability, and sometimes you'll get this question. The question comes, what accountability system you guys use in Berkeley, California? And I think most firefighters that ask that question are looking for you to tell them about the infrastructure that usually involves tags and Velcro, okay? Full disclosure, I'm not a tags and Velcro guy. When somebody says to me, Dave, what's the best accountability system in the American Fire Service? They're looking for an infrastructure answer, and I say, the incident command system. And something ahead of time, specifically in a procedure, as you guys have started to develop, if you and I know that the first 2 engines and the first truck are on the fire floor, and they're doing that in a disciplined manner, and Vic, you're my division supervisor, and you're talking to Bill as the incident commander, we're building a great system. Does Bill and Brian and Dave need to know what the blood type of the AO on truck 2 is? I need to know what his blood type is, just in case there's an issue. Look at the tag, so and so. No, I don't need to know. I need to know where truck 2 is, and they're there, and there's somebody that is managing their risk. We know that. That builds our accountability up right off the bat there. With regard to that, if we have a good procedure built in place, it makes a lobby control officer's job a whole lot easier as people are coming in. Okay, where did engine 2, truck 2, and engine 5 go? They went to the fire floor. Good, we got them accounted for. A big part of lobby control, though, is the people that are coming out. And this becomes a tall order. Ma'am, what's your name? Where did you come from? And this guy that was working for me that day was doing a real diligent job at that. So one of the brush fire communications I get, PK, from dispatch. Rapo command, this is dispatch. Dispatch, go ahead. The son of the woman who lives in apartment 805 has called us on 911. He says he's trying to get a hold of his mother and he can't get a hold of her. Okay? Now, I think you were the one that mentioned this to me last night, I think. That's what developed into where FDNY, if somebody says, if there's a possibility there are people in 1005, we're sending a company to check that out. Same thing here. This was a brush fire. I couldn't just say, well, she's probably fine. Well, 8 was going to be above the fire floor, and maybe she's not fine. So I get that information, and I'm getting ready to give an assignment to at least a 2-member team, if not an entire company. Command from lobby control. Lobby control, go ahead. Dave, I've got that person accounted for. The name, I can't remember what the last name was. I'll use the hypothetical Ellen Brunacini, Mrs. Smith. Mrs. Smith was in 805. She was there by herself, no pets. Her apartment was starting to get a light smoke condition. She is now in the RTD bus down at 19th and Arapahoe. I'm like, that was fantastic. How did that work that way? So that, when it became a brush fire, it was quickly extinguished just because he was doing a good job. So that lobby control who's doing that position, and it's not a one-man job. When you get that on the front end as a skeleton framework on the front end where we're focusing on get water on the fire in a search, at some point in time, if I'm part of that system, we're part of a command team, I want to get you some help, okay? So here comes Levon from Engine 3, and I say, I got mostly bad news for you, okay? It's not, none of it's good news, is you need to shed all of your gear and then go over to the command post and assist as a command post support team, all right? Can't we go inside the fire? But later on, when you're talking to girlfriend, husband, friend, whatever the case may be, did you go to that fire? Yes, I did. Don't tell them that you were command post support. Just say, I was dangling from the rope. Did you see the news? No. Well, there was a firefighter dangling from the rope, and that was me. All right, you can make something up if you have to. So, all right, so shift gears here just a little bit. But 1955 Arapahoe, quickly controlled, quickly brought under control, not a whole lot of complications associated with that one, okay? Let's see here.
I have a quick question.
Fire away.
You mentioned power ladder is a great master stream device. Do you guys use the RAM monitors or anything similar as an option for commercial power lines where you're just not getting it with a couple 2.5?
Absolutely. So,
No, that's what we saw at that university fire when Oakland and Alameda County showed up. It's a little like master stream that you can put on like a 2.5.
Paul's done that a lot in warehouse fires.
so back in the day, and you guys will all remember this, back in the day, somebody a whole lot smarter than me, when we came into the fire service, there was a deck gun. It was a pre-piped deck gun. It was deck gunned, end of story. And somewhere, I think it was probably the early 90s, was the first time where I saw these pumpers are come in and inspect with a deck gun, where you're able to actually disconnect that deck gun and use it as a portable master stream appliance. And we started teaching that at FDIC. And it was interesting, and I'm talking about the one where, is that true right now, Mike? We could disconnect a deck gun from a Berkeley pumper and put it on a base that's probably carried in the compartment.
Yes.
Fair enough, that exists. We started doing is we started putting a straight bar across a doorway, the back legs of that ground device against that bar, and essentially the bar, the door frame, the building are countering the nozzle action. The key to it though, Vic, if you're using that device, the deck gun as a ground device, there is a 32-degree limit on that. And if you go below the 32 degree, it has got to be secured in a big way, or else it's going to start moving on you, okay? That's the 800 GPM one there. I believe the ones you're talking about is Task Force Tips version is the Blitzfire, okay? It has an automatic shut off on it. The RAM is Elkhart's version, Rapid Attack Monitor. Akron names everything after celestial body. So I think theirs is like the Mercury or something like that. But those are all in the 500 GPM range. What I really love to see, and I'll see a lot of these fire departments will have a pre-connected, those 500 GPM devices pre-connected off of the rig for like an attached garage where you simmer it down and then you get a line into the house. You could certainly use it off of a standpipe, absolutely. The standpipe is designed to accommodate a 500 GPM, but you just have some sort of a method to counter the nozzle reaction with that. But we started doing that, and but you come below the 32 degrees, the big one can certainly move on you. I'm a huge proponent of those. So, Al, go ahead, brother.
I have a question. So going back to that building on Upper.
Easy for you to say. Many Indian names in Denver of streets. Arapaho, fire away, brother.
So we talked about like we had to do a backup supply line because there was a failure of the standpipe system. When you have balcony systems like that,
yeah.
Have you ever seen what like almost like a really extended drop coupling? Exterior standpipe? Yeah, like an exterior standpipe.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's a couple of things there that are swirling around in my brain. One of them is the very best engine companies I know on my job, those guys have got rope to pull line up. And if you can ask PK, back in the day, those guys were using the bleach bottles, and a lot of them still do. But something of a 1/4-inch nylon with some carabiners built into it on an 8-knot to where you can grab something and bring it up, that's huge. For a car fire in a parking garage, the best engine companies I know get close to the stairwell on the floor below, drop down, get a 3-inch, bring it up, and then start hooking up their high-rise packs and going to work. And then they have positive control. Modern fire hose is a lot stronger than the older fire hose. In fact, too strong, as we said yesterday. What I was taught, and I can't get this out of my brain from 1982, is anytime you go vertical with a hose line in that type of a stretch, a well hole stretch outside of a building, between balconies, parking garage, whatever, if you have a coupling that's off the ground, you have a vulnerability. And so what I was taught, and I think you were taught the same thing, Bill, back in the day, was the bullen knots. We'd get the running bullen, get down there below that coupling, take the pressure off that and tie it in so that you don't have, it lowers the probability of a separation. Now, what you said is another alternative. Maybe you come in and thread the building in and out, and you can actually put a coupling on the ground of a balcony. That's a possibility as well. Now, that increases the possibility for some kinking and that sort of thing. You'd have to address that, but you absolutely can do that. And this building would be a great example of a building where that could be done as an alternative. If we had a standpipe system failure here, absolutely not the end of the world. We could deal with it. It's a shorter building. We got balconies. The other thing that ties into that, and lots of times guys will ask the question, what about using Truck 2's aerial for this? And everybody has different opinions on that. I would assume that your tiller, like that Truck 5 tiller that I was salivating over last night, has a pre-piped waterway, okay? That allows you to build your own standpipe. Like John Norman, I'm not a proponent of that because what's the ladder's really function? Primary function is to rescue people, secondary risk for firefighters, but it needs to have the ability to move. So I'm of the belief that you could use the ladder to assist with building a separate standpipe, but to commit the ladder to be the standpipe, especially in a system that has 2 ladder companies, that would be a lower recommendation. Make sense? All right, cool. Fire away, Bill.
On this one, you have the picture of the one ladder company on the opposite side. You said they would access the apartment directly across from the fire, and that would be for rescue of
Yes.
civilian is priority, correct?
Correct.
I think it's important to emphasize that if they were to go in there and rescue somebody, that they do not open that doorway
Door control.
because of the possibility. Because if you look in the beginning, the smoke is pushing against the building.
Yep.
So the opposite side of the fire side of the building is going to be pressure on the high pressure side.
You're absolutely, and that's a good observation. Everybody see what Bill's talking about there? That's a great observation. And that's one of those things that it's hard to teach people. And we're in a younger fire service right now. All the more reason I would want Vic to be with those firefighters, especially maybe he has an acting AO for the day or a firefighter. This is their first day out of the academy and they're on my company today. So if I'm hearing you correctly, these guys on the opposite side, as they go in to do a search and establish that, obviously they're going to open that door at some point and they're going to take a peek. They might go out into the hall, but they have to control that door. And any opening of that door has to be controlled and it can't be open for a long time because you'll contaminate this area that where maybe there's a civilian. So if I'm hearing you correctly, that's kind of what you're saying,
Yeah,
right?
if they go up there and they want to take a peek, or they take a peek, and that's at the same time that, say the person in that apartment left their door open and you got fire in the hallway, and they open the door as the attack crews approaching that door, they're going to change the flow of that.
Got a flow path.
It's either going to put a blower on it.
So one of the things we're trying to get firefighters to do, to your point, Bill, one of the things we're trying to get firefighters to do is if I'm on the inside of this door, obviously this would work for, I could be inside the apartment right now. If we've come through there from the ladder, then rather than the standard issue, let's go for it, would be really, Levon, you and I being thinking firefighters. Slow down, take your time. I'm going to give it a little bit of a peek. And we can tell from this much if we've got a pressurized situation, if we're becoming part of the flow path based on what's coming in. And we can control that very quickly. But it should be slow, and we should have control of it, and we should be able to immediately close it back up, to your point. That's really critical stuff, for sure. And then, once again, like I said yesterday, and Joe, one of the things we talked about yesterday is rather than the wooden wedge at the floor, encouraging firefighters to go with a hinge-based control device. And as you and I come into the building, Joe, the curtains aren't always down right off the bat. We're looking for this top hinge. The real hinge we want to be doing our control is down here so that we can actually control the door from the floor position when we get there. There's a device called a Fat Ivan. And Fat Ivan is a hinge-based device that has magnetic components as well as you can hang it on a hinge, Zach. It was invented, Brian, by a Cincinnati firefighter. Fat Ivan. I really like the Fat Ivan. We did a training program in Detroit about 2 months ago. And when I mentioned Fat Ivan, a number of the firefighters, when they Googled it, it took them to a naughty porn site. Okay, so if it happens to take you to a different Fat Ivan site, the Fat Ivan site that I was encouraging you to go to would be the site that involved a hinge-based control device that was invented by a Cincinnati firefighter. So anyhow, Fat Ivan, the old Fat Ivan firefighter. The old Fat Ivan firefighter. Okay, let me...
This part of the guy that invented it isn't named Ivan, he was just breaking his buddy's balls.
His partner on the air.
Now, I use this sometimes as a title slide, and this is just a very short segment that I wanted to point out something with regard to multi-story, low-rise standpipe-equipped buildings, Brian, in your city and my city. The title slide that I used on here, as I say, there's never been a more dangerous time to be a firefighter than today. I think that sometimes when you and I read Report from Engine Company 82, or we hearken back to the warriors, or we listen to people and they say, you know, we just don't have the fires in Berkeley like we used to. I think a lot of that is nonsense. And here's where I hang my hat with regard to that. The most destructive fire that has occurred in the state of Colorado's history occurred 2 years ago. It occurred in the 21st century. It didn't occur in the 60s or 70s. Now, I understand that my father, as a 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s firefighter in Denver, was going to a lot of structural fires in that period of time. There would be an argument to say perhaps more than we're doing today. I understand that. But I still believe that for you and I as firefighters today, there's never been a more dangerous time. And we have to let the youngsters know about that. So PK, this was a fire that occurred in the city of Glendale. It's a 5-story multiple dwelling building. This occurred in Glendale before we merged with them, and Engine 5 is now that Glendale Engine Company. It was a intentionally set arson fire on the first floor that was something that started from a domestic violence situation. Oh, geez. You guys are contributing to me negatively or positively, depending on how you say. Are you guys doing a breast cancer thing this month? Is that why I see a lot of the pink shirts? That's awesome. That's outstanding. So anyhow, this happened in the 21st century. Fire intentionally set on the first floor. It got going very quickly. Now, I grew up in South Denver, PK, and this is a building I remember seeing up at the old Celebrity Sports Center. I didn't think of it as a kid as I do regarding a firefighter, but it was an older building that was around when I was a kid. And as you know, I'm no spring chicken. I didn't think that this building from that age would have lightweight construction. This is the principal structural component that was holding up the floor and roof systems inside that building. And this is a flaw that I have, Joe. I guess sometimes I just don't understand that there's young men and women that don't know who Gilligan was or where his island was. There's some people that I don't quite understand that. I get locked in sometimes, James, to lightweight construction being this contemporary modern thing. But lightweight construction has been around for years. And the difference today for us is that lightweight construction has now been fighting gravity for years. And this is the worst kind. This is essentially, Mike, it's strip mall construction. But if we could take strip mall construction and make it worse, where in a strip mall where we have the web, which is actually a 1/2-inch full strength solid web of rebar type steel, and then we have a top and bottom cord that are metal, but they're all non-combustible. Fair enough. So there we get our type 2 construction. Well, in a lot of those commercial buildings, and a lot of what, and I don't know for sure, but as you were driving me down to Fives last night, I'm looking at some of these buildings. Those look like the modern podium type constructed buildings with the lightweight wood on the upper floors. If you look at this one, the web it's not even solid metal anymore, Brian. It is a hollow pressed tubing that is really very lightweight metal, and then the top and bottom cord are a 1x, a lightweight wooden 1x.
Directly across the street from your hotel.
Perfect.
Same thing.
And so if it exists right across Center Street from my hotel, or whatever that cross street is, then it exists where else in the city of Berkeley? All over the place would be not a stretch, okay? So the top and bottom cord that are combustible, I believe that Levon told me today that he's going to work a certain number of years. You've done 12, you're going to do another 14 before you think about retiring. Before you're done, before your time is, and by the way, thank you again for the ride this morning. Okay, before you're done in the fire service, okay, there will be a 6th category of building construction that is just called lightweight. They're just going to say lightweight. We're going to call it lightweight because this is not type 2 because it has combustible components, okay? It's not fully wood frame because it has non-combustible components, but it's absolutely lightweight construction. So let me show you how this transpired. Before it got to this point, PK, we came in literally probably on the 5th alarm, if you will. And we get in there, and our incident commander was a guy named Miller, who was a very good chief officer and is retired many years ago. But when he got there, he gets reports from our guys that there's a woman on a 4th floor balcony on the Charlie side, and she's screaming for somebody to rescue her. Now, I'm not trying to throw anybody on the bus here in terms of other fire departments or whatever, but when Chief Miller went to the command post and went face-to-face with the incident commander for the fire, he said, "There's a woman on the balcony we need to rescue. What's your plan with her?" And the incident commander, PK, said, "Well, we've written her off." And Miller's like, he's gonna wring this guy's neck. He says, "She's talking to us right now. You can't write her off. Are you out of your mind?" So Miller basically said, "Hey, do your thing. We're gonna do our thing." Well, at this point in the fire, you can't get a ladder truck or or anything in the same zip code as the building. 35 at the time is the longest ladder. I had mentioned to somebody that we talked to last night that we are going back to 45s now because of things like this. So we're trying, and it was before we get to this point, we're trying to get to that position. So Miller assigns truck 19 to put a stick on, this is on the Charlie side is where this woman is on a balcony. Miller assigns truck 19 to put a stick up to the 4th floor level. Truck 19 Rescue 1 go in on that stick. Obviously the building is in a bad way, heavy smoke conditions. They're using ticks. They find her apartment. They force the door to her apartment. The captain from Rescue 1 is raising the tick, and as he raises the tick, the entire Charlie side of the building collapses off the building. So if you look closely at this, this was the Charlie side of the building, Alfonso. You see the stove and stuff that's just kind of hanging from the air? The captain from Rescue 1, Noah, he lowers the tick and it's like, okay, we better get out of here and get out of here and hurry. Now, the woman unfortunately passes as that collapse occurs. My whole reason for showing this photograph is so that, Mike, when you and I are doing a standpipe operation and applying high-rise, BFD high-rise procedures to a low-rise building in the city of Berkeley for a standpipe operation with high-rise procedures in this less than 75-foot building, I think there's a probability you guys might be in a building that has that 5-minute window of opportunity. And as they tell us, if the strip mall structure is actually burning, we're down to about 5-minute window of opportunity. And hearkening back to my dad in his time and some of the senior folks in the room, there was a time, Colin, and you're probably aware of this or maybe worked in part of it, but the old 20-minute rule. The old-time firefighters on Denver. I love working for him. He always gives us our 20 minutes inside that building. And they're not out in front of the building with all the weight of the world on their shoulders. And oftentimes, from a chief's perspective, Vic, guys were coming out of the building. We got it. We're just about there. We just about got it. I know, but I need you to come out of the building, get naked, and go to rehab, all right? So please do that for me. So this Spanish Gate Apartments is an example of a building that had a standpipe. It could be a standpipe operation. I can tell you the buildings of this side, the best engine companies I know on the job, are stretching from the pumper because of positive control and a questionable standpipe. But don't forget about the low-rise component as we discuss things today. And that's just a short excerpt from that Spanish Gate Apartments as a residential low-rise fire, if you will. Moving over into this one here, and this next one that I give you is absolutely a more, I got to get rid of that. Let me do that. Okay, let me try this here and see if this works. This one was a complicated one, and I think it will tie in nicely for some of that discussion, benchmarks, what are we doing, why are we doing it, so on and so forth, okay? This is that series, and I talked just a little bit about it yesterday when we were talking about standpipe systems. James, this was a building where we had Zern PRVs, the same type of PRV that I've identified in Berkeley, California. Zern PRVs inside this building, Brian, 50 PSI, 5.0. 5.0 was the top pressure we could get. Because we're using high volume, low pressure weapons, specifically our 2.5, we were able to get very effective streams, probably in the 230, 235 range. Not optimal for that, but absolutely can extinguish a lot of fire with that. So this building has a set of 4 separate high-rise buildings that are connected together, built in 1981. Those terrace buildings look like something where you and I can get to the roof, but as you guys have seen in this city, what happened in this city with regard to Truck 2's ability to spot at a building? It's much diminished today than it was a decade ago, because where the parking lane used to be, the parking lane is now out here, and now there's a bike lane there, all right? And then when you get there, if you can't identify the fire building, look for the police car. The police car is going to be in front of the fire building for you, okay? All of those things contribute to pushing us out further. In this case, landscaping, a little bit of the setback, the terrace of the building, the parking lane, now the bike lane, then the parking lane, then the turntable. We cannot get a standard issue 105-foot aerial or 100-foot tower ladder to the roof of the terrace building. Regardless of how many floors it is, that makes it a high-rise. If we can't get to the top of it, that makes it a high-rise, all right? So a little bit of an overview of that building. Right in here, and I'll come over to you guys here in a second, PK, right in there is a terrace level, if you will. That would be the roof above the lobby, is right in this area here. People are gonna go out there and smoke their pot. They're gonna go out there and have lunch, whatever the case may be, all right? But I'm pointing to this area right here, Joe. That's a terrace level, and it's an exterior terrace level. The day of the fire, roofers are using torch down methods, and if anybody's familiar with roofing, roofers will use a torch down method to heat the material to seal something. In this case, they're trying to seal around a skylight, okay? As I said in yesterday's training class, I love the fact that plumbers exist and roofers exist because it's a lot of job security. Well, plumbers, roofers, and stupid people, okay, and people that smoke pot are what allows you and I to have employment and a pension, okay? That's a big part of it right there. They use too much heat. They use too much heat. As they use too much heat, Joe, it gets into the void space and it starts going horizontally. Horizontally was not a huge problem. Once it gets to the vertical of that north tower, then it starts going vertically, and it is off to the races in a big way, all right? So, let's see here. 34 floors above grade for the South Tower. South Tower, PK, didn't turn out to be the critical area, okay? It does have a floor 13. Yes, there's no superstitious people in that building, okay? South Terrace on Champa Street, okay? North Terrace on Curtis Street, 7 floors above grade, 3 below, okay? North Tower was our problem, okay? North Tower is 23 floors above grade, 3 below. All right, it does have a floor 13, which is a mechanical floor. All right, the 4-building complex has 3 floors below grade. Now, I mentioned this one and used this as an example yesterday. You know, there's one that is one that's 34, L. You know that the one that's 34 has got 2. There are 10 separate stairwells in this complex. Fair enough. All right, a 34, a 23. Let's see here, a couple of 7s. I'm not quick as math as you are. How many individual standpipe system hose valve outlets would exist in this 1 square block complex in Denver, Colorado? Okay. And somewhere, it's got to be a 3-digit number, all right? How many of those individual hose valve outlets have ever been opened? And I don't know the answer either. I'm going to say that probably most of them have not been opened. If the building is a 1981 building, okay, let's see here. My basic math takes me to say that that is what we're talking 42 years right now. Okay, all right, sophomore year. You had some good times in the sophomore year, though. Yeah, that.
I did smoke a little bit of pot.
Did you really? The deputy chief is behind you. Okay.
I didn't inhale though.
Picture that hat with just picture that hat with long, flowing hair and a Camaro.
I'm either a Camaro or a Trans Am is with the listen to some Journey music. That's a great thing. All right.
He's more of a Boston guy.
Nothing wrong with that. He knows you, Bill. He knows you.
He does know me.
That's a good thing for sure. So, okay. You can kind of see a little bit on those mechanical levels on the building that's across the street, but once again, you get kind of a different band, and that band kind of is the telltale sign of what you have there. But important for us when we get there, as somebody's doing reconnaissance, where are the mechanical levels? Is it a 2-zone system? Where are the shutoffs for the elevator? What do we need to do? And more importantly, what areas do we need to try and protect? Because one of the biggest issues here, and I got this early on because I established a North Division supervisor in that North building. Early communication from him to me, Al, was this: command from North Division, I have hundreds of gallons of water starting to flow out of the elevator hoistways for the North Tower. Can we use the elevators anymore there? No, we can't. So there's 34 floors that have got to be searched and accessed, and guys are going to have to be able to do that based on getting to those positions by climbing, all right? So kind of an overview of that building and what it looks like, the directions, everything's crooked in downtown Denver, total of 10 stairwells, 2 in each tower, 3 in each terrace building. They're color-coded throughout the building, okay? And they're numbered 1 through 10. South tower and continuing in a clockwise fashion. So there's the stair 1 and stair 2, I should say, for that south tower, okay? Those become important to us, all right? The stair 3, 4, and 5 for that terrace building, and they're labeled in a green fashion. And then the stairs 6 and 7 for the north tower, those are particularly important because that's where our biggest problem is going to be. And then the stair 8, 9, and 10 for that other terrace building portion right there. Big complex, a lot of stuff going on here. How would that complex be labeled or identified by the Denver Fire Department Fire Prevention Bureau or by the Denver Building Department? Would it be identified, do you think, as a fully sprinklered building? It absolutely was. It absolutely was a fully sprinklered building. Did sprinklers activate at this fire? Many, many sprinklers activated based on heat. Did any sprinkler water get to burning solid fuels? Absolutely none whatsoever. This fire, Vic, was a truck firefighter's dream, okay? If Brian would be in heaven. Because Brian, we would put Brian loose with his crew on a given floor and say, Brian and crew, expose everything here. And that was the winning portion of the game there, is just truck firefighters aggressively opening up on multiple floors to expose fire so engine companies could actually apply water, okay? All right, we talked about those stairs and the color coding of those stairs, okay? How those were specifically set up and the number of stairs in the building. Most applicable obviously are the stairs in that north tower because that's where we had to go. James, go ahead, brother.
So the sprinkler system didn't reach the fire because they intentionally had those void areas?
It was a void space fire. So,
It wasn't the sprinkler system function.
no, absolutely not. But it goes to my point. So one of the things I said yesterday, and this is something I try to do with younger firefighters. I find a young firefighter in the room, and this is a bunch of veterans in this class. It doesn't work for this particular setting. But if I can find a young firefighter in a room or somebody that's attending a seminar that I'm presenting, I find that younger firefighter and I say to that firefighter, is there any such thing in our world? Is there any such thing truly as a fully sprinklered building? And you're shaking negative to that because you've got time and distance on the job. How many years are you on, James?
Well, after a while, you start reducing or subtracting the years.
Yes, I understand that.
15?
You how long? So
More than 15.
more than 15.
Yes.
You're a veteran firefighter. Are you a captain then?
No.
Which rank are you?
Firefighter.
Firefighter. Okay, just what we need is senior firefighters in the fire service. It's a great thing. You've got time on the job. So when I made that statement, Vic, is there any such thing as a fully sprinklered building? James, without hesitation, and immediately said no such thing. And that would be my wish and want and hope. And that's how I would want you and I to mentor the youngsters coming up and what he's doing right now. There is no such thing as a fully sprinklered building. And in the process of Chief Sprague trying to get you guys from 3 to 4, and this chief right here trying to assist with that, we've got to convince people in the community that yeah, I understand that you believe nothing's going to happen in that building, but things can happen in that building. The real key is for you and I not to fall into the trap of believing nothing's going to happen in there. It's a fully sprinklered building. Some of the best stuff I've gone to has been in allegedly fully sprinklered buildings. This would be a complex that the fire protection folks would say is fully sprinklered. So if this is that terrace level, and this is where they're doing the torch down method to seal a skylight, and it starts to go horizontally and then it goes vertically, it was all a void space fire, but it's a void space fire that is traveling multiple floors in this 23-story tower building. It's generating enough heat in those rooms and it's producing enough of a smoke condition, but the heat being primary, where it is fusing sprinkler heads, but none of that water is going on the fire until Captain Brian gets in there with his guys and hooks and tools and is opening up feverishly. We're getting those 4 of those hand lines that we stretched into different positions to put water on the void space fire. So that was what's going on. I always, same thing, James, I always tell people, if we're sitting in a fully sprinklered building, most great firefighters, in addition to having been previously pot smokers, okay, most great firefighters were at one point, yeah.
Previous, yeah.
Well,
Previous.
okay, previously. I need to emphasize that, Chief. It was a previous thing. There's something he did previously. So what is your policy on pot? Okay. Most good firefighters, Colin, at one point in time were pretty decent pyromaniacs as well. As a kid, I had the red Tonka snorkel, and I still have the red Tonka snorkel down in my crawl space. When you bring it out, there are significant radiant heat damages on the Tonka snorkel, because some of the best fires I ever went to before I was on the job. And I'm like, screw the Tonka snorkel, get a couple of garden hoses. This thing's getting out of control, all right? So this fire came in, Morgan, no surprise to you, as an automatic alarm. And I know that I sound like a broken record here, but I can't emphasize enough that the automatic alarm by professional firefighters is something that's taken seriously every time. If it starts to become a nuisance alarm, then work through the Fire Prevention Bureau to address it and use some teeth that way. But in the meantime, when we're responding to that place, we owe it to ourselves and to everybody else to take it very seriously. 750 Adams Avenue in Memphis, Tennessee is probably one of the greatest modern examples of what can happen there. This is about 8 o'clock in the morning. So from the chief's perspective, okay, we're early in the shift, but who worked last night? Because you guys have got the mandatories, okay? You've got trades that are going on, and you guys are on a 4896. So is this the second shift of the 48, Noah? If this is the second shift of the 48, and I asked Brian this morning when I saw Brian. I said, how was your night last night? Brian said, not a bad night. Engine 2 and Engine 5 took a pretty good beating, but not a bad night. So today, you were ending your 48, so you're starting your 48, but perhaps somebody was mandoed, or could somebody go 72 deep in a row? Yeah. Is there somebody working today on Engine 2 or Engine 5 that's 72 deep? And I know that you've got a whole city you're dealing with right now, but the point is, this early morning fire, we could lock in initially, Morgan, on, okay, it's an early morning fire, everybody should be well rested. Well, what about somebody that's starting on 72 of their third 24 of 3, all right? Things to think about that I try to think about myself. For you guys that are testing for chief and you're thinking about chief, there's Vic, when I first became a chief, the way I was raised on the DFD, not by my father, but the example I saw from most chiefs on my job, present company accepted from this police. You probably had a similar experience. Most of the chiefs that I saw as I was coming up as a firefighter were assholes, okay? And you were told as a younger firefighter, don't talk to the chief. The chief doesn't want to hear from you. The chief doesn't want to hear from you. He doesn't want to talk to you. You know what I'm saying? That was the example I had. Don't even talk to the chief. Full disclosure here, when I first became a chief PK, I think I was probably a bit of an asshole. So I thought, hey, this is what I have to do. The chief that I am today, and I'm proud to say this, I think I'm a much improved chief today, but I've changed from they work for me to I work for them. Okay? And I think it's made me a better chief. And what I'm getting at there is when we have that 6 o'clock in the evening fire, who has not eaten dinner yet? Okay, we brought the fire under control, secondary search is negative, but now we're going to have to, Arson's going to come here and I'm going to need somebody to hang on so we can do a final search and do some post-control overhaul. But asking those little questions like, Cap, did you guys eat dinner yet? No, we didn't. Who's cooking tonight? We are. Okay, I need to get truck 2 out of here. And I want to make that, whoops, I better not do that. I want to make that a priority. But thinking about those things, as you evolve, Zach, and you become a chief officer someday, that's just something I would encourage you to do. And you probably would be doing that on your own. But think about those different things. You know, this whole body of people that are responding here today, what is it that I can do to take care of them best? Okay? We not only haven't eaten dinner, we haven't eaten lunch yet. Oh, geez, that's a real problem. Came in as an automatic alarm. No second source calls. It was a Sunday. Not a lot of occupancy in the building, cleaning people, that sort of thing. Maybe some people working over the weekend. Obviously, the roofers were there. Came in as an automatic alarm, no second source calls. So at the time, engine, truck, and chief that respond to it, okay, truck 4 got there in about 3 minutes, 2 minutes and some change, I should say. While companies were en route, then we started to get those second source calls, okay? And then dispatch upgraded to a full assignment. And that happened pretty much after truck 4 got there. So 3s, when they arrive on scene, they're northeast bound, they report smoke showing from floors 6 through 8, North Tower building, and from the roof line of the South Terrace building, okay? What else do I need to know right now to call for additional help, PK? I know it's a high-rise building. I know there's a fire in it, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and call for help. So engine 3 spots on that FDC and gets ready to go to work. That's one of 2 interconnected FDCs at that building. For some of these modern buildings, and Morgan, I haven't looked at it, you might be able to answer the question for me, but at the Renaissance, I've seen an FDC over on that main entrance side. Perhaps there's a secondary interconnected FDC. I got a call, Mike, from a friend who is the operations chief in Ann Arbor, Michigan, another college city, if you will, with a tremendous endowment of which they give none of that money to the fire department, okay? He was asking me, do you think it's a good idea for our new buildings to have 2 FDCs? Absolutely, absolutely, because it gives us that built-in redundancy and a second place to tie into the building. Wall-mounted double Siamese, and engine 3 being the first goes to work on one of those locations, okay? Upgraded alarm, okay? 3s, 6s, 8s, Tower 4, Tower 1, Truck 8, Rescue 1, Hammer 1, Chief 2, Chief 4 respond to the fire, okay? So let's see here, and I won't go through those specifically. Opposite side of the building, a second interconnected FDC. 3rd due engine company, Brian, 4th due engine company can go to work on this second FDC, and I can get water into the building, and now I have 2 complete, separate, 2-pumper, tandem pumping operations, and I've got a really good built-in redundancy there, and I'm putting in a significant amount of volume and pressure into the system to make this thing work for us, all right? Once again, our pumper on the hydrant uses 5-inch supply line, 35-foot section, and then they will pump to the pumper that's on the FDC. That's an overview of how that looked, all right? Normally I paint them red just because I can, but I guess I was not in a red mood when I normally do this one, all right? Identify those buildings that have the separate FDCs, okay? And we already talked about what you can do in terms of water supply if there is only one FDC in place, all right? All right, so let's see here, some additional resources requested. Early on in the event, Tower 4 is one of the first companies that arrive on scene, all right? As they are entering the lobby, making their way to the directed location of where the fire is, the atrium glass skylights above that lobby level, okay? They observe smoke and so forth at that level, and they realize that there's something going on. That, James, was the void space where they're starting to see fire before they actually get to the position where they can start to do some stuff. You can take one look at that, and if you're thinking the same thing I am, if I'm a firefighter walking into that, or if I'm the chief in charge of that, that's a complicated building. There's a lot going on there, and that's a complicated place. Triggers for you and I, if we're a command team cap, triggers for you and I. It's a complicated, dangerous building. Boy, there's my 3rd alarm right there. I don't have to do much of this.
So all 4 of those buildings are all pretty heavily interconnected?
Yes, they're all absolutely interconnected. All absolutely interconnected. And it's just a very, very complicated complex of buildings, all right? Post-control photo that I took about 2 weeks after the fire, showing some of the damage and where there was at. We talked about command posts and where I set up a command post location. I wanted a 2-sided view. I chose this location, Al, because that was originally where some of the smoke was showing, okay? But I chose that location because I wanted to have some instant information. As I said, the fire started in that location, which is that terrace level where people can go out and do whatever it is they need to do, all right? accidental and unintentional, but caused by that torch down roofing operation. All right, that's how that looks out on that terrace level. There's some of the, I'm not a detective, but those are clues. Okay, those would be clues as to what's going on there. So James, can you see how that travels and then it starts going vertical, and that's part of the problem. You can see they put some dry chem on it. What they did with the dry chem was what? And it harkens back to what we know today. Joe, I've always been a huge proponent of the smoothbore nozzle. So last night at 5 Zone, I'm looking at those crossloads and I see the People's Choice nozzle on there. I'm like, man, this is a fantastic thing. I believe there is certainly a place for the combination nozzle, but what we now know in 2023 is a combination nozzle on a cone-shaped pattern entrains significant air and could cause a push, which is exactly what they did with the dry chem here, is they created enough of a push to further enhance this fire into the void space. Fire is on all of those levels that you see right there into that North Tower building, okay? Second alarm requested, get additional resources in there. One of the things, and we talked about this yesterday, I know, but one of the things that I always encourage firefighters to do with regard to this vertical stuff is take a look back at that MGM Grand fire and understand that for this fire, the big issue above and beyond opening up, exposing, and getting water on the fire, the big issue is the smoke propagation to 4 separate high-rise buildings and how much smoke is moving into those buildings. And how is it affecting people at the time? All right, so let's see here. Come back over to some of these. Once again, the aerials are not able to make it to the roof. Level 2 staging. A department that you have in the state of California, LA City, is probably one of the most disciplined fire departments in our fire service with regard to level 2 staging or base area management. They specifically park their apparatus so they can be moved independently. And that's a good thing to do for your base area or your level 2 staging. Park them so that they can be moved independently. That's a real important thing. All right. So attack stair 7, okay, and a little bit of how that looked. Okay. Some of the opening up that had to take place. We talked about the 50 PSI off of the hose valve outlet due to PRVs. And this is very applicable for you as Berkeley firefighters and Berkeley fire officers. That's the ZERN. We know the ZERN exists here, okay? Field adjustable, as I said before, I don't call it fire ground adjustable. PK, we could potentially adjust it on the fire ground. It is complicated though. It's complicated. Now, you have to remove that upper bonnet. Once you remove the upper bonnet, it exposes an adjustment nut. Lavon, we were able to drop a deep well socket under that adjustment nut and make an adjustment clockwise to increase, counterclockwise to reduce pressure.
This is with water in the system.
Yes, yes. All right. Now, that fast wrench, the fast wrench is specifically designed for this. When the jaw of the fast wrench is fully open, Colin, it is designed based on that size of the fast wrench being fully opened. It's designed to fit on that particular ZERN bonnet. The larger of the deep well sockets on the fast wrench are designed to fall over that adjustment nut. Could that fast wrench be a valuable and applicable tool for the Berkeley system? It absolutely could, because what you'll find is that the fast wrench oftentimes is less weight than a pipe wrench, an adjustment rod, and the other various tools that would be needed to do everything the fast wrench does. Now, I'm not the marketing director for Fast Wrench. I think that guy's doing a great job, and I think he's produced a really good tool, and he's refined it significantly since we got the original generation of tools in Denver. But I gave that information to Mike. Okay, Mike has that information.
One more time, you say clockwise reduces or increases?
Clockwise, I'd have to actually look closely again at it. One of them reduces, one of them increases. I know that's helpful, right? I'll have to study that one. One of the rooms, one of the areas, to give you a little bit of a look of what was going on there and the work, Brian, the truck work that had to take place that's going on. Once again, heat activated sprinklers, but didn't get to the void space fire. Just a lot of stuff had to be opened up. All right, on multiple floors with multiple hand lines. Fully sprinkler building, all right? Fully sprinkler building. All right. And once again, existing on multiple floors. Those windows that you see that are broken there were interior windows that when broken, that glass went out into that open lobby atrium area. That's where that went. Go get them, boys, from Engine 6. You're looking good. All right, so I used a third alarm plus specials on the assignment based on, once again, not wanting to get to a point. Easier said than done when you have the resources available. Once again, I know yours would be drawing from a broader Bay Area pool of resources. And I know that's easier said than done as well. I'm able to do this most of the time from within. So we talked about this previously with that Granite Tower example, but what if it was a significant fire where we're starting to get a wraparound of fire on a tower, we're starting to get some falling debris, whatever the case may be. God forbid we end up in a situation where there's bodies that are falling out of the building. That's a good spot to get into that building. It's under an overpass. You have that protection there. We could get into the building via a parking garage, and that's sometimes you want to think about what is the remote way that I could get into this building and protect myself. Well, at this particular complex, there's two ways that you could potentially do that, and it's just something to think about as well. Also, from a separate building across the street, and then that footbridge could give you some access into the building as well. All right? Now, getting close here, and my brother Brian, who's got the TV brick, is going to be eyeballing me soon. I've got about 2 minutes before we hit our warning time, and then we're going to break for lunch, and you're going to give us some logistical information. One of the things I wanted to make sure that I included with you is this, and I thought about this based on places I've stayed, some of what I've seen in your city, a lot of what I've seen in my own city. This fire that occurred on that East Mexico Avenue that required 3 hand lines, early extension onto the floor above from 10 to 11. That's what the window looked like on the floor above. This is the 11th floor window. Okay, fair enough on that? The window from the 10th floor apartment, because of that wind impact, that entire window on the 10th floor apartment was completely incinerated, frame and all. Fair enough? Now, I'm going to try and do this, and Joe, I'm going to ask you to protect me from harm. And if I happen to crash and burn here, rather than letting me look like a jackass, which is going to be a short trip, I would ask that you and Colin rescue me at your earliest convenience, all right?
Are you standing on that?
I'm not going to stand on it, but I'm going to put some weight on it. I want you to know that after Engine 5 and Engine 24 knocked down the main body of fire in this fire apartment on East Mexico Avenue, there was a team from Truck 19 that's doing a search inside that apartment. We don't hold hands, and I know you don't either when we're doing a search. You and I try and have that verbal, but you might go right and I might go left. Al, how you doing over there? I'm doing good, Dave. You okay? So on and so forth. Or, you know, a lot of that's what's going on. This Truck 19 firefighter goes to the right. His partner goes to the left. As this Truck 19 firefighter is searching, and remember, as we all know, James, the smoke humbles us. You've seen that for 15 plus years, as you've told me. The smoke humbles us. We're not able to see a lot of things. Look at that. Colin's a good man. It's the paramedic in you is coming out right now, so on and so forth. And I won't get too crazy with it because I have other people I've got to take care of in my life. As that Truck 19 firefighter is searching, and you've been there and you've done this, Morgan, where we have the smoke. There's our warning sign, my brother. The smoke, the condensation that starts to cover that face piece. You and I try to get it with a gloved hand. We do different things. We're down low. We're trying to see the best we can. I mean, think about it. Every time you and I do a search at a fire building and we get done, and then we get into post control, and we went outside and we dropped our gear and we drank some Gatorades and we did our thing. Secondary was done. Now we're waiting for the fire investigators. You and I go back into the building, don't we? We pop our helmets on and we follow the path that we searched. And isn't it always a tremendous humbling experience to say, that was a pantry? I had no idea what that was. Or this was a bathroom? I didn't have an idea. Did I put my hand in that toilet? Really? I need new gloves. Okay. You're amazed at where you were. And when you and I see kind of our demarcation line and some of the carbon from our glove along the wall, it's like, this is where I was. I had no idea this was the room I was in. It's humbling for us. So this firefighter is doing a search, and in the process of doing that search, this firefighter does this at one point. And he says to his partner, he says, hey, Al, there's a big ass hole over here on this side of the room. Little does he know it's a 10-story hole. Because I'm concerned about these buildings that have floor up windows, and when that's entirely gone, one of the concerns as a chief officer is we could lose a man directly out of the building. And that's what almost happened to this Truck 19 firefighter. Young guy, Joe, physically fit, guy that does the CrossFit, lots of dexterity, athleticism, that sort of thing, but he damn near fell out of the building. And he had no idea he was almost falling out of the building because of the zero visibility. So you'll see these, and obviously from an architectural standpoint and from the standpoint of selling properties and so forth, I think you're going to see more of those in Berkeley, California. Pass it on to the youngsters. When you're searching in this particular building, be real careful that you don't fall out of the building. Now, I wasn't the incident commander, but I was the second alarm chief on this. And this is one of those things where guys don't talk about it too much. And I started to hear about it at a kitchen table at one point in time. And then you start to listen closely and you say, what are you guys talking about? And everybody's kind of like, I want to talk about this. I believe in the Gordon Graham non-punitive close call reporting. We should all be talking about this is what I did, and I almost got myself jacked up by doing it, and you guys should know about it. Eventually, this young man shared with everybody that went on and said, no, that's fantastic. That could happen to any of us. But then I start thinking, what if he really fell out of the building, Zach? All right. From 9/11, one of the things that I learned from 9/11, as you did, is we found out that the pass devices on Scott air packs are pretty darn tough. Because if you remember listening to 9/11, you heard a lot of dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. So maybe that survives, or maybe it doesn't survive. But if it doesn't survive, picture me at the command post from the division supervisor. Division supervisor, Vic's looking around. Where the heck did he go? He was right here. We're looking around. Like all of us, you're going to be reluctant to say anything. He's got to be with us here. Is he in the hallway? We're not. Eventually, command, I'm missing a guy. Well, what's command going to say? I don't have him at the command post. You know what I'm saying? It can become a real complicated and problematic deal. So the takeaways I would like you to have from the end of this portion of the session, Morgan, is fires can and do occur in buildings equipped with sprinklers. We must always be prepared. Remember, there's no such thing as a fully sprinklered building. Just like you started us off really well yesterday, Mike, call for help early and maintain a tactical reserve to the best of your ability. I tell firefighters from smaller and medium-sized fire departments, if you're simply not able to maintain a tactical reserve, then you probably have to move to a defensive operating mode earlier than you'd like to. Simple as that, by not having that tactical reserve. Be prepared for and stop horizontal and vertical fire spread, and most importantly, smoke propagation. Standpipe systems are low pressure systems. We got 50 PSI outlet pressure for engine 3's attack line, and you do the math on